Good evening, folks. Um, we're going to be looking at the chess position in this stream. Um, so, um, this is just a real short video. I wanted to take a look at this position and kind of get into the what's going on here. Um, I thought that this was a very, very good position to learn how to defend. It's not something that the average chess player is strong at doing, and I really felt like that. So when this position occurred for me um, in the Puzzle Rush survival mode on Chess.com, I did not get it right either. So don't be discouraged if you do not get this puzzle right. It's a very difficult puzzle, um, and I could not um, basically find the right idea. Um, so I did find in this position the move e4, which is pretty obvious because you're forking the queen and the rook. But and I did anticipate the move queen to g4, but I did not see in this position before e4. I did not see all of white's threats. Okay, so to be clear, when you're in a difficult position, and I consider this a difficult position because of the what I consider to be the piece preponderance that surrounds the king. Anytime that your opponent has so many pieces that can participate in an attack on your king, um, I would consider that to be to be defensive. Although in this game in this position, black obviously has attacking resources, but it first required black to find a very obscure defensive method. So after e4 queen g4, the issue that's at hand here is that white is threatening to move bishop to f6. And then, for instance, black cannot capture the bishop because he has two minor pieces which are threatening mate on g7. So after bishop to f6, there's in fact no good way for black to defend against mate. For instance, if allowed, let's just make a move for black to show the Latin threat. If bishop to f6 is allowed, there is forced mate because if you push g6, then there's knight to h6, which is checkmate. The knight and the bishop work together. So bishop to f6 cannot be allowed. And for that reason, there's no time to take the rook on d3, which we had initially attacked. So we thought we was forking two pieces here, but white's creating Latin threats against our king. So we have to do something about that. And the two variations that I looked at were bishop takes f2 and um, f6. I think were the main lines that I looked at. And I also looked at g6 because I saw bishop f6 coming, and I was like, "Oh man, this is not good." So we had to find some idea. So the problem with bishop takes f2 immediately is king takes f2. We still don't have time to take this rook because bishop to f6 is a threat. So we would have to find the move h5 here, and then this gets the queen off of the g file. So bishop to f6 is no longer a threat. So now obviously if white plays bishop to f6, we can take his queen, right? So he has to take this pawn, And then if we take the rook on d3, black is better in this position, but this is far from clear. Okay, like for instance, the computer says rook e5, queen g4, protecting the knight on f5, g6, knight h6, king g7, c4, f6. I mean, so that you can see how complicated this would get. This is very, very difficult. This is not the best defense for black. So backing up, after bishop takes f2, now another variation is if after h5, or wait, not after h5. Another line here instead of bishop takes f2, which is not the ideal defensive situation, is like say f6. So the plan here is if white takes the knight on d5, then we can take the bishop on g5 and maybe survive that position. But the stronger move is bishop takes f6 here, and then if g6 again, knight h6 mate, and if black plays bishop takes f2, there's no need for white to even capture here. He can simply move his king to f1, and the threat of mate on g7 is inevitable because again the only move that stops it is either rook f7 or g6, and rook f7 can be met by take playing knight h6 and knight takes f7 followed by queen takes g7. There's also rook takes d5 even. So I mean, black's is completely losing there. And again, that g6 knight h6 mate is the problem. The queen on g4 is the problem. So even though I didn't find the correct defense here in this position after queen g4, the correct defense is the move h5. This move's counterintuitive because you don't think as black that. Now keep in mind, this was a puzzle rush, so we knew it was a puzzle that we had to solve. It wasn't like a real game situation. So he was already given a lot of information by knowing that it was a puzzle, right? And I still couldn't find the correct continuation, h5 here. Very counterintuitive move, but it does just what we needed to do, which is alleviate the threat of bishop to f6. And in fact, it's the only move that sufficiently alleviates this threat of playing bishop to f6. And defensive moves like this are kind of paramount to defending really difficult positions. So when you're trying to defend difficult positions, you're going to encounter all kinds of hidden resources, and being able to find those resources, especially while on the clock, is going to essentially separate you from the masses of chess players that exist. And it would be grandmasters that would find moves like this probably very simple. I was going to give this position to a few friends of mine who are titled players to see if they could find the correct idea here. So what is the purpose of h5? Well, the purpose is to get the queen off of g4 so that bishop f6 is not a mate threat. So that's the idea. And in the meantime, create time for us to take this rook on d3. Because after black takes this rook on d3, if he's able to, it's going to harmonize the rest of his pieces. The rook's going to have an open file. The bishop will be be attacking f2, and in combination with the pawn on d3, which is actually very strong in and of itself, since white cannot capture the pawn. Let's take a look. So queen takes h5 is pretty much forced. Other moves just allow black to gobble up on d3 and have a winning position. So after we take the rook on d3 now. And the problem for white is he cannot just simply recapture this pawn because rook to e, it weakens the back rank's like kind of hidden to be weak because the king that's on g1 has to step up to g2. This is the point, and it steps right into the line of fire from the queen that's on a8. So king g2, knight f4 is actually a double checkmate because the knight and the queen are both checking the king. So anytime there's a double check, we know the king has to move, and he has no place to move. So it's checkmate. So very nice, and this actually shows the harmony. It shows how all these three pieces, the queen, the knight, and the rook, all working together to attack the king. So knowing that, white cannot take on d3, and this pawn is now very threatening in this sense. So notice that the pawn on d3 is going to allow for a base for this rook to enter on e2 at some point. If the pawn wasn't on d3, we wouldn't have rook e2 because the queen could just capture it. So this pawn is going to allow the rook to be protected when it arrives on e2. So what happens here after e takes d3 is that white simply doesn't have a good move. These three pieces now lack harmony, and he cannot sacrifice one to accomplish anything on the king side. So we're sufficiently protecting the f6 square. That's pretty important here. Otherwise, he may have some bishop to f6 idea. But and the move knight h6 essentially leads to nothing because for the queen and the bishop to accomplish something against our king, he would have to have control of this f6 square, which he does not. Notice that in the initial position with the queen on g4, before we play h5, white has the possibility to play bishop f6 here because of the attack on g7, not just by the bishop and the queen, but the knight and queen as well. So taking the bishop would essentially not protect their king because the queen comes down, takes on g7, checkmate anyway. And this distinguishes itself from this position where bishop to f6 is no longer a threat because we can simply take the bishop with the knight on d5. And let's see, there's a few things to talk about in this position. If he decides to play bishop f6 anyway, and then play queen g5, he's threatening mate on g7, but we have a very nice tactic here. Bishop takes f2, opening up the king. Again, the rook has this lever of pawn on d3, very important, because after king f2, rook e2, it's in fact black who's mating first. He has no choice but to come to g1 or f1, and then the queen arrives on g2, checkmate. So we get there just in time. So that's one of the key variations. Another variation here is if white decides to attack the knight on d5 by playing c4, we simply use this pawn on d3 to lift our rook to e2. We have this double attack on f2. And basically, if the f2 pawn moves or is captured, mate threats for black, starting with knight f4, which will attack the queen, are kind of inevitable because if the pawn on f, if you can visualize this pawn on f2 being gone, the move knight f4 allows the queen and the rook to have a battery here along the seventh rank. So after c4, rook e2. There is no really good defense here for white. For instance, if he captures the knight on d5, we have bishop takes f2, king g2, queen d5, king h3, and then we're gobbling this guy up. And white's, completely lost here. There's a number of ways to win this position, but chiefly speaking, f6 looks like a threat because of the pin here, which would gain even more material. Black has a decisive material advantage already, so he's just up a rook in this position. So reverting back, it's really difficult to find anything better here for white. I did look at knight takes g7. This runs into bishop f2 as well, because after king takes, now he doesn't have to take with the king, but essentially if the bishop's just allowed to set here, there's going to be threats. Notice that there is no particular threat even after white takes on g7. He's not really threatening anything on the next move, so we're going to have time to he has to move his king anyway, but we're going to have time to play rook e2 and then knight f4 anyway. So it's very dire situation. So, like for instance, knight takes g7, bishop takes f2, king takes f2, rook e2, king g1, and you can, for instance, play knight f4 here. It's completely winning since queen g2 is threatened. We're also taking away squares that the queen could possibly protect the g2 square. If the knight comes to f4, the queen cannot come back to h3 to protect g2 because we can simply capture it. So you're always trying to make moves that disable your opponent from making defensive moves. It's multi-purpose moves that attack and defend simultaneously. So the move h5, really beautiful concept, and a necessary concept to survive this position, in fact. Because without h5, I believe that, let's turn the engine on here, but I believe that it was, I think there might have been, okay, so I think that bishop takes f2, like I said in the beginning, is better for black, but a much, 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 much more complicated scenario, as you can see here. So the best move is in fact h5, and bishop takes f2, very complicated to work through the details of that particular move. But as I say, after bishop takes f2, king takes, you have to play the move h5 here. You can see only move. Every other move winning for white. You have to find this move h5 anyway. So backing up, the point is that the move h5 immediately enables black to retain the option of playing bishop takes f2. Because if you don't have a follow-up to bishop takes f2 that's decisive, it actually allows white a little bit more time to coordinate a defense on the second rank potentially. So you only usually want to sacrifice minor pieces when the other pieces basically come to your aid in a decisive way. So you have to be careful about sacrificing pieces just strictly on feel rather than calculation, because bishop takes f2 is very complicated and certainly doesn't lead to as much of an advantage as the move h5. Um, H5, very counterintuitive move. Like I said again, don't beat yourself up if you did not find this move. I did not find this move, and I'm pretty sure that a lot of strong players didn't find this move. It's very difficult. Uh, it's counterintuitive in the sense that you're weakening your king side further. You have these pieces surrounding your king, but yet you're choosing to weaken the king side even more. And the truth be that after queen takes h5, the construction of this queen, bishop, and knight is not um, is not uh, is harmonical a word. There's no harmony between these pieces in this position um, because black protects the f6 square with the knight. If this knight was not on d5, then it's true that bishop to f6 would probably be decisive because you're threatening basically just to take the pawn on g7 and then give mate on h8. It's really hard to find a defense to that idea, if not impossible. So it's this is the kind of uh, the art of defending difficult positions and achieving your maximum counter chances. Because, like some people that I know have said, it seems very difficult to believe that White's not in the driver's seat here. He has very, very well coordinated pieces. Attack on d5, pin on the knight, all types of things going on. Maybe even b4, because notice that the knight and the bishop control this d6 and e7 squares. So this bishop's actually running out of space. So there could be, like if, for instance, if this knight on d5 moves, White wouldn't have any problem simply exchanging queens because after rook takes, the move b4 probably just picks up this bishop. And so the position's pretty dire, and that's the reason why that black needed to find this move h5 to create harmony for his own pieces and alleviate the immediate threat to play bishop to f6 by white and force a checkmate. So if you found the move h5, that's wonderful. If you found all the variations there, no, I don't think a lot of players will. Um, there could even be some really strong players that miss that idea because again, it's counterintuitive. And if you want to work on your defensive chess, my suggestion is because a lot of people work on attacking chess, they study tactics, all these different things like to improve their attacking ability, but not a lot of players find enjoyment in studying the art of defense. And if that's something that you're interested in doing, I can recommend to you a couple manuals that will certainly assist you with that. There's a Chessable course and a book. So you can get the book or you can get the Chessable course. It's called Mastering Chess Defense by Johan Helston. I do have it myself on Chessable. I don't have the physical book, but that is a great book. And I also took his master class on Chessable at one point in time, and I felt like that really, really helped my ability to see my opponent's resources. Because one of the most important characteristics of that separates, like, say, Class A and B player away from experts and masters is the stronger player's ability to see his opponent's resources. And so a lot of times we're only focusing on the moves that we want to make, and we're not focusing enough on what our opponent's trying to do and being able to make sure that we combine what we want to do with what we need to stop our opponent from doing. And that's usually the big factor that separates, say amateurs from masters. And um, another book an old book that I had read many years ago, that also had a chapter on that was called "The Art of Defending Difficult Positions," um, was "The Art of the Middle Game," which is written by uh, former world title contender Paul Karish. It's K-E-R-I. I'm sorry, K-E-R-E-S. First name Paul, Paul. Um, a, I guess he was a Soviet candidate that played in the 40s through the 60s, and Paul Karish, Alexander Kotov, Kotov were the dual authors of that book. But the particular chapter on art of defending difficult positions, I remember winning awards because it takes you through some classical games and some positions that were difficult to defend, and basically helps you understand the mindset that goes into that for the masters. And I feel like that book's probably the first book that you should read about defending positions, and then maybe tackle Johann Helston's Hellsten, by the way, his book on mastering chess defense. He also has other books on mastering chess openings and mastering chess strategy, which are kind of like a set of books together.